Good evening, everyone. Might be a little late on the countdown because I was adjusting my windows. It is E2KG Deep Dive, Episode 8 for August 20th, 2018. And unfortunately, as you've no doubt guessed, this is SwissGuard, your host. And, I have the professional capability that I'm more concerned with the OCD of making sure my notes window and my web window are properly proportioned and watching Agasicles countdown. And I glanced up and it was already at 1. And in my brain, I thought, I wonder how long we've been at 1 second. And I assume that we've been there for a while because DBQ, my colleague here, has been laughing at me this whole monologue. So how are you, DB?
So actually, I think your timing was fine. The hilarious part is your OCD aspect of, it is the most energetic opening that E2KG has ever had, where somebody starts off and says, I think we've been at 1 second for quite a while now. Welcome, everyone. So
Yeah.
That's a great way to start off the. No, but you're right.
I'm being conversational.
Yes, you are, and you're being very concerned about our viewers' time and making sure they're not waiting for anything. So we'll skip the pleasantries and we'll keep going. So, but it is not just you and I here tonight. We also have Agasicles as well, but he's on the social media, so we should probably meander our conversation a little bit further first.
Yeah, he's also probably questioning a lot of things right now.
Yes, well, he is the one that locked you in as host. So at this stage, we're gonna make it through.
Yeah, we can only go up from here. So yeah,
but we've got good stuff tonight. This was a good week, and even today has been some interesting news. So
yep, it's I think this was the first week in a while where I had trouble narrowing down what stories we're going to pick for E2KG Deep Dive, where we basically monitor the news all week, and so we've been doing that for the past week. Then we pick some stories that kind of tie together or just are in generally what we feel like we want to talk about from a metagaming perspective. So I'll take the first story. This was from Bloomberg, and it's Super Mario creator warns gaming industry, don't be too greedy. So says the legendary video game designer who created Super Mario and Donkey Kong has a word of advice for today's industry. Stop nickel and diming users. So basically, Miyamoto was at a conference recently, and he said, quote, "We're lucky to have such a giant market. So our thinking is if we can deliver games at reasonable prices to as many people as possible, we will see big profits." And basically, he was promoting the fact of using the fixed price model. He doesn't like the current basically mobile model of microtransactions. And he's like, if we put quality stuff out there, people will buy it. The field of dreams strategy, in a way. If we build it, they will come. So he says, I can't say that our fixed cost model has really been a success, which is an unusual caveat. But we're going to continue pushing it forward until it becomes entrenched. That way, everyone can develop games in a comfortable environment. By focusing on bringing games to the widest range of people possible, we can continue boosting our mobile game business. So this is the first of our two kind of headliner stories, which DB, you have a story from Microsoft, and it's kind of not necessarily on microtransactions, but an interesting development in the world of video game profit seeking.
Yeah, so that's our second story. That sounded a little more excited, at least. No, I really want to go back and talk about this, but I think you're right that they do tie together a little bit, Swiss, because one is about kind of thinking about game profit margins, and the other is the rumor that The Verge leaked and had out there last week, and then was confirmed today when Microsoft announced that their Xbox All Access, where they are bundling a console and Xbox Live and Game Pass for a monthly fee. So there is no down payment, that there's no financing interest charges for 24 months. You pay a flat rate per month, and as long as you make your payments, that in 2 years you own the console. So there is Xbox One S for $21.99 and an Xbox One X for $34.99. So this is only in the US. This is only at Microsoft stores. But I think there's a lot more here to kind of unpack. But again, it's that aspect of how do you make games and gaming accessible to people. And so in some ways it's the counterpoint to Miyamoto's of the low barrier to entry with free to play, with a fixed cost, that there's, in this case with Microsoft, there's no startup cost, that all you have to do is pay a monthly fee. But what do you own at the end of it? And you own the console, but not necessarily any games or services at the end of that as well. And so it's definitely a business model decision, where I think that Miyamoto's comments related to fixed prices is almost, I mean, it is still a business decision, but there's an artistic and an artistry argument in there as well, right? That difference between games as a business and games as an art form.
Right. He mentioned, he kind of touched on that. So he said it's necessary for developers to learn to get along with subscription style services. He said, when seeking a partner for this, it's important to find someone who understands the value of your software. Then customers will feel the value in your apps and software and develop a habit of paying money for them. So he's definitely taking a much longer term perspective on the service model. And he's talking about value in software. So we've talked about this on E2KG numerous times. These games that are built with microtransactions in mind, it affects the structure of the game. It affects the mechanics. It affects the gameplay. Like, people didn't like how Battlefront 2 went down, but they built that to make money as a microtransaction, with a microtransaction model, and it affects the consumer experience. So Miyamoto's point is, they still want to kind of commoditize the software so that the developers can focus on making quality titles. And I think, it's an old-fashioned. It seems old-fashioned the way he says that now. Thinking about, you're looking at Fortnite, and we're putting skins everywhere, and now this with Xbox. Agasicles, let's pull you in. I know you're intrigued by it from a journalistic perspective, I would say, with the Xbox, but do you like the direction that Microsoft is going, where they're focusing, the hardware is just like a means to an end, and it's just to get you in their subscription universe? Or do you feel that that's going to ultimately have a negative impact on the art form, as like what Miyamoto would describe as, we just need to focus on building software and letting the consumers purchase the software?
Well, the way I grew up, my parents would call this the flim flam shamalama ding dong deal, right? The thing that's not straight up, the thing that's not clear, the thing that sounds shady. Like it's not a clear, you pay me money, I give you a thing. Now that's at the most extreme. Look, I trust Phil Spencer, right? At the end of the day. So, and I get where Satya Nadella is trying to take the company. So I get it and I understand it. And it's a strategy that comes from when you're beleaguered and besieged and you have just flat out lost this generation. Numerically, we kind of downplay it, and I agree the downplaying, right? I don't think that the overall strategic picture is as dire as the numbers indicate. But if you do just look at the numbers, this is like one of the most severe wallopings a console has ever lost. I mean, the margin by which they are losing is ginormous. So that's a thing to be considered. I completely get and understand the reason for going to this model, because it's been the model that the wireless carrier and smartphone industry have gone to, and it's been successful. And it seems weird to equate your smartphone to a console, because I think historically we've always thought of a smartphone as being less compute or less of a piece of hardware than a console. But the fact of the matter is that smartphones today cost twice as much easily as your console does. So it's really flipped, and it really, in that context, makes sense. It's not the thing for me as a consumer. I'm just not rolling. That seems like a backwards model to me. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's interesting that you brought up the smartphone comparison, because yeah, it does feel like the smartphone type plan, but the difference is, and this kind of goes to Miyamoto's point, we don't buy smartphones for the software. You know what I mean? I don't really go and buy a Samsung Galaxy S9 because it plays apps X, Y, and Z. We have the Android ecosystem and we have the iOS ecosystem. And as long as you roughly in the last several years, you're going to have access to all kinds of software. It's not, you're not locked out of anything.
So I'd agree that you're like that, and I'm like that, but I don't think the rest of the most of the world. I don't think the rest of the most of the U.S. is like that, because as I mentioned in the Flock chat, the huge difference, and you see it replicated throughout, tech journalism, and it drives me nuts, and I can't stand the people who do this because I think they're wrong. But I've heard many journalists, most journalists I would say, who cover iOS and are iOS users, when asked by their friends, should they jump ship and go to Android, they recommend them not to because of the money that they've invested in apps. And when you look at Windows Phone, why did Windows Phone fail? The so-called lack of apps, or the app gap as it came to be called, didn't bug me at all as a Windows user, because I knew how to operate around that. But I think the vast majority of other smartphone users are attached to their apps in a way that I think console gamers become attached to their software libraries.
But I guess my point is more that you're getting an ecosystem with the smartphones, and with the consoles. If I get a Switch, I get The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I could have a long line of Nintendo consoles. The only way I'm getting the Breath of the Wild is with the Wii U or the Switch. If I have a PS4, that's the only way I'm accessing Horizon Zero Dawn. Like, I can access my Android apps on my Google Pixel, or on an LG, or on my Samsung Galaxy, whatever. So I just feel like the games drive things more than the smartphone. To me, like, the smartphone itself it's a tool, and but like you said, maybe I just have a different perspective than others.
But I think at the end of the day, what you're really saying is that the console, it's actually even more of a reason for the console to go to this kind of model, right? Because the lock-in that companies gain from you in the smartphone model, and it's a weird thing because the carriers, and this is going to be a double thing here, because the carriers are the carrier for the virus, right? Like, the carriers are the ones that bring you the phone, or the smartphone manufacturers have to bring you the phone through the carrier. But with the smartphone manufacturer, I mean, what they get is they get lock-in, right? You use the phone for 2 years because that's the way the wireless contract is built. That at least gives them a foothold and gives them a chance that you're going to re-up for the same series of phone the next time around, right? So
I would say that it does if you view apps the same way as you view game content. I don't view app content the same way. They're all tools to me. I don't care, what iteration of my email app or my web browser or my message app I have. Like, I'm in I use Android. I'm in that ecosystem. I do care whether I'm playing Horizon Zero Dawn or a Final Fantasy or Super Smash Brothers Ultimate or a Minecraft or, you know, whatever.
Right. And so what I'm saying is that the smartphone model has been successful whether people tightly couple apps to their phone or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore it's actually more of a reason because we know for a fact that people are more tightly coupled to the notion of their console and the games that are supported on it. It's more highly correlated to people staying in a given ecosystem. And so that's even more of a reason for Microsoft to go to this type of arrangement. It should be stickier in effect than even the smartphone model has proven to be.
Yeah, I'd like to go ahead, DB.
No. I mean, I think that I'm with Agasicles on this. And I think originally I was a little more skeptical of this, but as I read the fine print details, right, that this is a 24-month payment, that you own the console at the end of those 24 months. You know, that going back to your comparisons here with mobile platforms, you know, that if somebody is paying this low entrance per month fee, and they're getting Game Pass and Xbox Live, which means they're getting games with gold currently, and all the new first party stuff on Game Pass, they wouldn't necessarily have to buy anything in the ecosystem. So the you know, they're not going to necessarily have a big portfolio of apps that's going to keep them here, but at the end of the 24 months, they're going to end up with a console, and you know, that they own. So they physically have a box there, and potentially over sales, they might have picked up additional things. They could stop Game Pass, but now they're an owner of that unit, and their investment cost to then flip platforms is going to be similar to a phone. It's a whole new big investment where they're going to end up with a low barrier because they now have a physical hardware device that they own.
Right, but the key difference will be, and I mean, and that's provided that the other console manufacturers don't play ball, right, and go to the same model. If Microsoft is the only one that offers this, then what happens is at the end of the 2 years, you've got your Xbox One or whatever the next thing is, right? You've got your Xbox One, all of your achievements. I mean, we may not get into it tonight, but another thing that I think is pertinent to this is how people identify these days. And how people are becoming much more tightly coupled to brands in conjunction with their social media presence, in conjunction with their achievements, accomplishments, track records, all that kind of stuff. It's as I get deeper into streaming, it's much more highly correlated now with how you identify and what you identify with. But my thing is, what they're going to have is at the end of this 2 years, they're going to have their Xbox thing. And it's going to be paid for. And so the thing is, what do you do at that point? You either continue gaming on your Xbox thing at no cost, right? Other than paying whatever now it would be hopefully the reduced price of your Game Pass subscription plus Xbox Live Gold, right? Or you're going to swap. And in that case, you're either going to swap to another platform, you're going to swap to PS whatever, you're going to swap to Nintendo whatever, or you're going to stay on Xbox One. If you stay on Xbox One and you take that console, because I'm sure they're going to have a trade-in, right, thing just like the smartphone guys do. So you're going to take your Xbox thing, you're going to trade it in for credit to reduce the price of the next thing. Again, you're not paying any upfront cost, right? So when you go and you buy a smartphone today, I walk into the store and I walk out. If I put that phone on a payment plan, which again, 99% I try not to. With my family's phones, they can be on a payment plan because I don't care, because they're going to stay on their thing for 2 years. So if I go to the store to get them a phone, generally I walk out of the store at zero cost. If anything, I have something coming to me in the first bill. But lots of times, and at most I wind up paying like taxes and fees, and I pay like $50 like the first day. But a lot of times, given whatever the deal is, I walk out of the store with zero money out of my pocket. So they're going to go trade this thing in. They're going to get the next X thing, or the Scorpio, right? The midsection upgrade. Or if Microsoft starts multi-skewing these things, and you can get different boxes with different power in them, they're going to go in and get the next most powerful thing at zero cost and go home, right? as opposed to their option is, I'm going to swap to the PS ecosystem and eat a $400 initial buy-in, cost barrier that I got to leap over to get into that thing. So I get it, right? It's not appealing to me because I think I'm kind of like you, Swiss, and I'm kind of like you even for games, right? And again, I have the proven track record, right? When I got pissed off at Microsoft and had eaten my last red ring of death, right, in 2010, I was like, no mas. And people were like, dude, you're giving up all your games. I'm like, I don't care. Like, nobody locks me into anything, right? I went and bought a gaming laptop and I walked, and I came back 5 years later. So, I mean, the lock-in doesn't matter to me. So, again, it's a model that's not for me. But I doggone sure absolutely. I mean, this is, DBQ, you mentioned, talking about young people, right? And when they hit that age where they have disposable income, this is a 15-year-old who can walk into, well, I mean, I guess you have to be 18 or over to sign up for the commitment. So, but even so, let's say your parent signs up for the commitment. I mean, this is an incredibly empowering, again, method of surmounting the barrier of initial cost, right? People can walk into a store, sign a piece of paper, and walk out with a console and 2 years of gaming ahead of them.
So I think that's a really good point, right? Like if you are, even if you don't have necessarily a lot of disposable income, that this is a very attractive entrance point, right? This is a low barrier to entry that somebody can come in who's got, that they know that they could carve out $25 a month or $35 a month, and for some people that's not going to be possible, right? That for some people it's the one-time payment that's going to make the difference, to be able to save up for that or to sell something else to make that. But for some people, that just like it becomes one other expense. It's Netflix, it's Hulu, it's Spotify, it's Apple Music, right? I mean, there's all these other subscription models that people are already paying for above and beyond whatever their mobile network and data plans are. That this just becomes one other monthly fee that we're willing to consume. So at first, when this rumor came out, and this is the thing this is where I've kind of turned on this, is in a positive way, where I'm more in favor of this now than I was a week ago. That the rumor behind this, at $800 for the Xbox One X for $840 over the course of 2 years, seemed like a huge amount. Where I could wait for a sale and get an Xbox One X with a game and Xbox Live or 3 months of Game Pass for $450, But adding all those things up at the current price point, and this is the thing that I think will be interesting because, and I want to ask you, gentlemen, this is how much of this is because of where we're at in the console cycle, not necessarily in sales, but in terms of overhead, of price points, and of how close we are to the end of a gaming generation, right? Like this was a rumor back in 2012 where the Xbox 360 could potentially have a subscription service like this. But at the end of the 2 years, if I pay for Game Pass at the face value of $10 a month, and I pay for Xbox Live even at a sale price of 1 year for $50, suddenly I'm at basically $840. If I've paid list price for all of these things, this is, to me, it feels different where there's not a markup, there's not an increase for convenience sake. It is simply just taking the list price and spacing it out.
I mean, you're definitely, because you're at like 770-ish, right? But my thing is depending on how you look at it, if you completely discount the Game Pass, right, you're at a cost savings overall in comparison to how much you probably would have spent buying games, right? Even if you only buy 4 full price games per year, that's $480 in 2 years' time, right? And I would say that's the casual gamer, right, who's buying Madden, Call of Duty, and maybe picks up 2 other things throughout the year.
Well, I think that kind of pivots us to the other aspect of this that I think we need to get into tonight is, first to go to DB's point, I think it's an end of generation trial balloon. There's nothing left to lose for them, and they can see how this fares. The fine print say the offer ends December 31st, 2018, or while supplies last. So this isn't. We need to caution that this isn't like some permanent, established Microsoft program at this point. I think it's still an experiment. And I'll add real quick that it's interesting that it's through Dell financing, so we see some kind of consumer grade PC. I think cross-pollination. Microsoft probably already has some sort of affiliation with Dell, but it gets to the root of it, which is the games. And admittedly, I probably view my apps in a different way than most people view their software. I don't buy a lot of stuff. I don't buy anything from the App Store. My phone is a tool, and I do buy games as discrete pieces of entertainment art. So what does not appeal to me about this Xbox All Access is that, as you said, you get 2 years of Game Pass, which is great, but you don't own anything at the end of it. And any games that you want to purchase to keep permanently are going to, added on, are newly added on costs. But that's not how they're going to pitch it. It's going to be like, you have all these games at your disposal for one low monthly price. And I don't like thinking about games that way, and I can't cross this barrier. There's one other story that we have.
Before you go to the other story, I want to just point out how perfectly this lines up with Miyamoto's statements, right? I mean, back to the original news story related to Miyamoto talking about these as, one-time transactions versus subscription fees or free-to-play models. That idea of committing to the art and committing to the ownership of it, it really falls in line with that model of thinking. And I don't know that I'm not saying that one is right and one is wrong, because I think that there, as both you and Agasicles have made points tonight, I think that there are arguments to be made, and then it becomes a consumer choice in terms of where they fall.
I
wonder what that does for the industry.
It can work for some types of gamer. I mean, it certainly can. Like a casual person that doesn't keep up with what's going on and they just kind of want to play some stuff. This makes some sense. But I feel I've fallen in line with Miyamoto, where it's like, as a developer, I'd want to put my heart and soul into something and present it to the world and say, this is what I've created, and hope that people like it and want to buy it, and and build that brand loyalty. And they say, well, that team, they know what they're doing, and the next time they put a game out there, I'm going to pay attention and I'm going to buy it. And it's a different strategy, and like I said, it's more of an old-fashioned strategy, but it's hard for me to think about things in terms of brand loyalty like a Netflix. Like, I mean, yeah, Netflix has their headline shows, but do you think about them because they're a Netflix original, or just because they happen to be on Netflix? I mean, if Stranger Things was picked up by HBO or Amazon, that wouldn't change anything. People would still be like, wow, this is really cool.
Well, but it would change. It would change something if you weren't subscribed to those services, right? And I think this is the way the world is changing. And I mean, Swiss, I got to give you kudos for. I don't know that I've been on an episode that I've been on such a roller coaster with another co-host where I'm like, oh, he's going where I agree. Wait, no, I don't agree with it. Wait, I agree with it. Wait, no, I don't. Because what I was going to say. So let me first of all say, I agree with you in that this is not the model for me. I'm not paying $35 a month for an Xbox One when I can just and go through all the hassle of paperwork and payments and all that stuff when I can just go buy the thing. But I disagree with you when I disagree with your notion that it applies to some kind of gamer. I think we're going to see the vast majority of people flip to this model, because I think, particularly along generational lines, I think we mentioned like in the Flock chat, like my impression, like millennials don't own anything, right? Like, and in fact, they've even gotten to me as this week or this past week, I've gotten so tired of futzing around with trying to figure out what music I want to buy periodically that I finally just gave up and went to music subscription services because it's easier. It offloads me of the overhead, right? You mentioned the type of gamer who doesn't keep up with stuff, but the vast majority of gamers don't keep up with stuff, right? The vast majority of gamers like their sense of game. A lot of gamers, like, their sense of gaming news is walking into GameStop and being told, right? They periodically go check the websites, but they're not like us with like 40 gaming site bookmarks tabbed in their Chrome browser, constantly crawling the news feed every day, like keeping up with this stuff. And I think I take that cue from, no offense to anybody, but like as I get more and more into streaming, like I get boggled a lot of times by the number of streamers that I go into who like don't know the things that I feel like we know, and we're not. I guess I feel like we don't dump a ton of time into this, and we have wives and kids and families and all that kind of stuff. But like, it amazes me sometimes that like you're watching a stream and there's a conversation and there's like a basic piece of news that we've tracked that I guess, but a lot of those guys spend a lot of their time like with their heads down playing games and streaming, and they don't get it. Like this simplifies their life in a lot of ways, right? People who are dedicated, and you mentioned the brand loyalty thing, which I think is the last thing that my own assessment doesn't quite line up with yours. I think people do hardcore these days. They go on to, even though the console wars I think are generally over in terms of a lot of the nitpicking, right, and the silliness, but still, people are Twitch streamers. Like, they stream to Twitch. People are Mixer streamers. They stream to Mixer. People are YouTube streamers. They stream to YouTube, and concurrently, and a lot of times you go and you look at those streamers and they're playing one platform, right? Which again boggles my mind, right? They're a Twitch streamer who streams from Xbox. And so I think people who are in the Xbox ecosystem, granted that theoretically there's 50% of them in comparison to the number of people that are in the PlayStation ecosystem, right? But I think it simplifies their lives if they just go rent an Xbox for 2 years. They get Games Pass. That they don't have to keep up, right? It's all there for them, right? Because I think what we're gradually going to see with Games Pass is a lot less of a delta between this whole, like, there are some games that release that don't show up on Game Pass and whatever. And I think a lot of those we're seeing are like legacy things that released before Games Pass hit and had to migrate to Games Pass. But everything going forward is going to hit Games Pass, at least from first party perspective. So I think this makes their lives easier because it brings them the whole ecosystem and serves it to them on a silver plate. You mentioned the thing about HBO and Amazon and Netflix, but people do. People,
you have convinced me at that level, because I will say, I've never seen Game of Thrones because I don't have HBO. So, QED. And you're probably right that more people are going to jump on this than I anticipate, and I just have OCD.
Right, and Game of Thrones has sold HBO subscriptions for the last however many years. I mean, people have subscribed to HBO for no other reason than Game of Thrones. So there we go.
DB, do you have something you wanted to jump in with?
Oh, lots of potential tangents there. But I think the one most relevant piece is, so I'm going to make an argument that it's not necessarily generational by age. I think there's a point there, right? But I think where we see this become the successful model is when it becomes generational by counsel, where I would argue that we've seen evidence that people are not brand loyal enough, and maybe the age generational Twitch streamer case that you're making, Agasicles, is correct. But I think the difference between the population on the 360, which then and the over to the PlayStation 4, right? The consumer has demonstrated that they are willing to switch and invest again in a different ecosystem. I'm of the belief that if they launch this if they do this with whatever new console they launch, that rather than a $500 initial price point or more, that if somebody can walk into a store and put down $30, $35, $40 and come out with the newest, greatest console, versus even if PlayStation is $100 less, being able to pay $40 a month versus $400, suddenly that becomes a whole different economic argument for the next generation of consoles. And that's where I think that this is a nice kind of, let's test the waters, let's get the blowback, let's get any type of criticisms out there and figure things out so that in 2 years from now we've got a successful model to roll out with whatever the new console is.
I honestly don't think there's going to be much, if any, blowback, just because of the state of affairs with the consoles and the point at which we're in the generation. It's going to come across as like a fancy sale that Microsoft can then use as an impetus to go where no game company has gone before. So I do want to bring in this other story though, because if we start moving forward with this, and this is going to become a problem, it ties in the Miyamoto thing and it ties in the whole Game Pass thing, because Square Enix just announced, they posted on the Steam page for The Last Remnant. It came out in 2008, I believe, 2008, 2009. It was Xbox 360, PS3, and then obviously they came out with PC. They announced that it will be delisted from the Steam page on September 4th. And this is it. Quote, "We will soon be discontinuing digital and physical sales of The Last Remnant on PC." The post read along with the departure times by region. No reason given. It's just not going to be there anymore. And I feel like a future of subscription games as a service, this will become the norm. I mean, on Netflix, every month it comes out, these are the shows that we're going to have on Netflix this month, the new stuff coming in. This is the stuff that's rolling off. And I just, as a gamer, I don't like that model. I don't consume games the way you consume a TV show. You can binge watch a TV show. I don't binge play games. Agasicles and DB, how long have you guys been playing Destiny 2? I mean, it's just, and that's a recent title. It's just, but you've been playing it for 2 years now coming on. And so I feel like my worry is, as we transition to the service model, the concept of a game as a piece of art that people can buy and own, and for lack of a better term, cherish. I do cherish my copy of N64 Ocarina of Time. I cherish my PS4 copy of Horizon Zero Dawn. I don't idolize it, but I like that I own it, and I'm glad that I own it, and I'm glad that I was able to pay the developers to produce something that I think is very worthy and great. And it's just this. It almost feels like a pull away, a resistance is like a chasm is forming between the consumer and the game developer that's going to be controlled more by these ecosystems and the ecosystem publisher. That I don't know. I don't like what it portends. And
so you need to start playing on PC.
I'm buying this stuff on PC though. That's the thing. Steam allows me to have digital sales, and I have digital sales on my Nintendo, but I still own the games. And you're right, I'm not entirely comfortable with that. But I still feel like I've purchased this and I own it, and as long as the ecosystem exists, I can access it whenever I want. With this Game Pass thing, who knows if they start pulling things on and off Game Pass to trigger renewals of subscription or what have you, or specials. Licensing games with Epic and Unreal, we're going to have stuff on there now. It's going to be pulled off. We see it with Netflix. Do you think that maybe I'm just crotchety and I don't like the fact that we have a seasonal zeitgeist when it comes to Netflix. But
no, there's a thing, right? And I've run across a couple of these blades of grass, even this week, right? Like, and on the video model, that was one I was all for, right? It just became overwhelming for me to keep moving my wallets of DVDs and Blu-rays, and eventually I was like, I am willing to pay Amazon and Netflix and Hulu money to just digitally warehouse all that stuff. And just give me keys to the storage center, right? Just let me walk in anytime I want to and browse through your unlimited catalog and select something. I don't need to physically have that weighing me down. But this week, I mean, there's been things like, number one, like I would love to be able to play Free Space. With No Man's Sky coming out, I've recently been going around and making sure that I have loaded up all my great sci-fi shooter, simulation games. But I can't get a hold of Free Space because it's in licensing limbo. And I didn't keep the physical copy of the disc. So that's a want and a desire that now I can't fulfill. And so that kind of stuff happens or is going to happen. I've recently been playing Left 4 Dead, and I went back and I just wanted to get through all the maps at least one time successfully. I went and I looked at the Steam Spy charts at like there's only like a few hundred players online with that game. And as we've been talking through this, I've been thinking, well, I would expect that what they would do is they would retire games from services or that they would look at the number of people playing the game before they took games down. But I'm like, but who's to say that 300 players still playing Left 4 Dead, who's to say that they should be left behind, right? Should one of the console manufacturers decide that they're going to take that game down? So there's things there that could potentially be issues.
Well, you have the whole. I'm being very negative and pessimistic about this, but if you have 3 AAA shooters on your page, right? Your publisher page, like Xbox has, we got Halo, Halo 5. Who's to say that you don't pull some of those down and drive the player base into, new hotness C, wherein, and this is when I'm going to get conspiratorial, new hotness C is also heavily microtransaction based or something. It's just, the publisher is starting to gain too much control over what you have access to as a gamer.
Yeah, and I guess the other trend I was going to mention that I noticed this week as well is, for instance, I had a new machine to set up. I wanted to get back. I have 2 versions of Corel Video Studio. I can't. There's one I can't get back to. I can't get back to the 2017 version. So I was gonna. That license is on the machine I'm getting rid of. I was gonna grab that license and put it on the new machine because I'm running the 2018 license on actually the machine that I'm on. Surprisingly enough, this is becoming a more common thing. Is software vendors aren't letting you get back to licenses once they supersede the product. And I get it. It makes their maintenance tail and expense shorter, right? So I would expect that same thing with console manufacturers going to this kind of model, games as a service, EA, right? Everybody, it's possible that threshold for when are we going to stop supporting a game and letting people play it and access it via our locally installed client, when are we gonna deprecate that from the population? There's a good chance it's going to skew in a direction that we don't want it to, right? So, and again, you're in a world now where you can't on PC, you can't go out and buy physical. So yeah, there's definitely going to be issues and problems with it, undoubtedly, and things that I guess what I worry about is even if I don't choose to get the Xbox whatever on this $33, $35 a month payment plan, I could still be impacted by the way that they handle games as a service, even if I'm going out and buying my games physically, right? There's potential bleed over on your inability to access a thing. So,
DB, do you pessimistic any? Did you worried that your gaming would be impacted by the service model, even if you're a purchaser, like Agasicles suggested?
So I think it becomes, for me, it's a matter of if I'm willing to, if that's a convenience that I'm willing to accept, right? Just like Agasicles talked about with music, right? That it's a convenience that he's willing to accept. But I've been thinking, as you guys have been talking, right, there are examples of just last night, my family and I sat down to watch a movie that was going off Netflix in September. And so we made a point to watch it before it was gone. I think there's the other news story from a couple weeks ago about places like EMU Paradise pulling their ROMs, right, because of threats of litigation and cease and desist from Nintendo. That if we, Last Remnant, other than the 360 copy, because the PlayStation 3 version doesn't exist, that it becomes harder and harder. Or earlier this summer, the Marvel Ultimate Alliance and Ultimate Alliance 2 was pulled from the storefronts from both PlayStation and Xbox. It was, remastered, and it sat out there for 2 years or so. But then, I don't know, maybe licensing agreements, things like that, pull it down. And so if you own it, great. Otherwise, it's no longer available to purchase. And so you're back to trying to hunt down, it's that preservation aspect, right? I think that there's an avenue there, and it's different than from music, and it's different from movies because they're more established art forms, or they're more established media, that there are preservation places there. But I guess it also becomes, it really does, it continues to go back to that Miyamoto comment of, is this a business, or is this an art form, an expression, right? And the argument of owning it to be able to come back to it at some point in time because you want to relive that emotional response, or the certain track that you played in a racing game, is different than saying, yeah, I want to have a similar experience that I paid a transactional fee for, that I found some entertainment value of, right? And so maybe that's a less precise argument, but I'm fine with, for most gaming, I'm very fine with not owning a whole lot. I've pared down my physical collection quite a bit over the last 5 years even. But there are some titles that I know that I want to hang on to a physical copy of because they're meaningful, because they're things that I may want to go back to with or without an internet connection at some point in time.
Now, I think one of the most interesting things, so we've talked about a lot of comparisons to the video model and the music model and the smartphone model. Swiss, you made a lot of mention of like how Netflix has things come and go. But what I find way more aggravating than that is Amazon Prime, in how things will be under the umbrella of your Prime subscription, but then they will float out.
Well, this is a very much a daddy problem.
Exactly.
And I know exactly what you're getting at.
Yep, because the kids can see it and they're like, we want to watch X, and I'm like, oh, that's not on. I've tried to adopt this model of telling my kids, like, if it's on Prime, that means we own it. So what I tell them is, when it doesn't have that Prime label on it, I'm like, oh, we don't own that one anymore. But with certain movies, what winds up happening is yeah, I have started a Disney video library of movies on Amazon Prime because, like, I'm not going to play that game, right? I'm going to slowly buy and add to that library so that on any given day, I can always say, here's a dozen Disney movies that you guys can watch, because I'm not going to have that Prime label ripped off. So the epiphany I just had is, maybe all this is okay until the day that they combine Games Pass and the storefront. Because when that happens, you're going to have commingled things that you own with things that you don't. And when that presentation comes at you and starts driving you down this path of, I'm just going to get Games Pass because I don't feel like dealing with all this, right? That's when I think it becomes a little greedy and a little obnoxious. Until then, I don't feel like this subscription model that Microsoft is going to falls into the same bucket as what Miyamoto is about. I think what Miyamoto is about like to a certain extent the Fortnite stuff. Definitely what Sony's doing with the not allowing people to crossplay. Definitely where EA had gotten itself with Battlefront, and maybe some other people that are going down similar paths. I feel like the things that are like decidedly and clearly what we regard as evil and greedy. I just feel like Microsoft is changing their model of how they're allowing people to access their content. They're opening up an avenue with a lower cost barrier, simply because they need to encourage uptake across a greater socioeconomic demographic than they have right now in order to compete with PlayStation.
Right. And I agree with you that at that level, I think it's a good thing. Like, I like the fact that it, like you said, the 15-year-old can go, or 18-year-old can go with the summer job and be responsible for their own content in a way. But
now on another night, we'll have the discussion of the problem I have with, however, what happens to neighborhoods when you democratize them and allow anybody to move in, right? which is highly likely what we're about to have happen.
The eternal September.
So I want to say, well, one, while we've been debating this, I've looked up where my closest Microsoft store is, because it's not a bad, it's not a bad deal. I think it really is. It's not nearly as predatory as it once seemed. I thought there was going to be a lot higher interest rate charge. I think you're exactly right, Agasicles, that it is just lowering the barrier to entry in order to get more people into that ecosystem for kind of, what you were talking about, Swiss, of the kind of the long-term investment and keeping them there. I want to twist the Miyamoto point and say it's not necessarily about Fortnite or about other mobile games. It's not about Candy Crush or other things. It's a statement of planting a flag in his own company. Because if you look at Nintendo's mobile revenue, 380 million, and the vast majority of that, over 300, was from Fire Emblem Heroes, right? Which is a gacha game, which is very much about the free-to-play whale-seeking model. And so I don't know that it's, it came across as an industry comment, but I think it is just as biting as it is about his own, internal company, in terms of where they end up going under their new leadership.
This has been an interesting discussion. We're coming up on almost an hour. So do any of you guys have any final thoughts on this? I mean, do you think, I guess my last real quick comment to throw at you is, will we see Sony try to establish something similarly in the next year or two? Whether it be a trial balloon, or I suppose if Microsoft is successful, they would, try to jump on the model if there's more dollar signs available.
So I don't know that we'd see Sony do it until it becomes the industry standard, right? Until the roles are reversed and that they are losing the next generation because Microsoft has fully leaned into this model. I think that Sony is a hardware company, and there's a lot of benefit to them of being able to have those sales. And I think they're also in a position of comfort where they wouldn't necessarily need to do this. So we'll see. I don't see it yet until there's a greater uptake in there.
Yeah, we know where Nintendo is going to be. I just for a while.
Yeah, just and I generally agree with DB. I mean, I really don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. I will say one data point just to throw out for people's edification is Sony also manufactures smartphones. The vast majority of their smartphones they don't have carrier deals with. They are generally sold at full retail price in something like a Best Buy or on Amazon or eBay. So at least that business segment of the company hasn't aligned to the more common smartphone model of selling things, at subsidies or whatever, and having carriers pay for them incrementally or whatever through customers.
All right, I think that'll do it then. I think this was really interesting discussion, and it took some twists and turns that I did not anticipate, which is why I like coming on with you guys and chatting. So Agasicles, our fearless leader, probably has some plugs.
Yeah, and again, I'll deny the leadership label. Editor and publisher maybe, but just as far as putting the content out on different channels. But yeah, tomorrow night we have the core show, Enough to Keep Going. I'll be hosting along with DBQ and Prime. Entertainment-wise, we're going to be kicking off the It's Another Thing movies series in September. I think I'm still waiting on a vote from Peter Morrow, but it looks like we're going to be viewing Life for our first flick, which and then we'll do that podcast hopefully in the first half of September. That's a sci-fi movie kind of along the lines of Aliens, starring Jake Gyllenhaal. I just brain dumped the other people.
This isn't the like Martin Lawrence, like Eddie Murphy.
No. This is a sci-fi movie, like I said, more along the lines of Aliens. Jake Gyllenhaal, Ryan Reynolds, and I forget her name, but the female actress who's something Vanessa Ferguson or something Ferguson, who was in Mission Impossibles 5 and 6, along with some other supporting cast members. So it looks like that's what we're going to be looking at, and then that will be posted. And then, like I said, for the It's Another Thing entertainment series, we will be back at the end of September, beginning of October to start covering The Gifted. I think because of Dave Pecci's schedule, we already skipped Luke Cage, and I think we're skipping Iron Fist Season 2 as well, and we'll just be covering The Gifted next. 2 new shows we're trying to get kicked off. I'm trying to get kicked off a show that focuses mostly on streamers, so the streamer culture, streaming technology, and streaming issues and services. So that's all the plugs, I think.
Sweet. DB, you have anything to add?
No, we'll be back tomorrow with more to talk about.
And who's up for the pick place tomorrow in the core show? Prime,
Ooh,
I think.
I think it's me, actually. Didn't we just gave Prime Paladins 2 weeks ago, so it is my turn. Yep. So I will give the viewers here a taste of. So what I think will happen is that I'm gonna have you guys force me to play something based on our last week's deep dive related to games that have a long life, that continue to sell, or that have come back to thrive. And so one of those potential possibilities will be Grand Theft Auto 5. Because that was a big topic we talked about last week in terms of some games that have continued to hang on and sell. So if you want to see what other games I might be playing, tune back in tomorrow or to catch our Game Experience show.
DB with the T's. All right. So I think that'll do it, everyone. On behalf of DBQHams and Agasicles Stamas, I am SwissGuard. Thank you for listening, and hope to see you again soon. Good night.